glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyamadi Pastyajadeshatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patidanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki. Well, it is very nice just to be here with you all again. Thank you very much for having me, and giving me the opportunity to do a little service here. The topic, as His Grace Vijay Prabhu mentioned, is devotee care, which is an extremely important subject matter. It's a very deep subject matter. It can be looked at on different levels. And it covers so many aspects of Krishna consciousness. But let us just make a start somewhere and just explore the subject. You know, it's a big subject. It's big enough that, well, we have actually in the GBC body, we have a devotee care subcommittee. And they do seminars, not just a single program as we're doing this evening, but seminars over some number of days, some hours altogether, because it's a big subject. But anyway, let us start somewhere. And I think one interesting place we can start is that the GBC body has come up with a sort of a motto, you could say, in relation to devotee care. It's a nice motto. It's a sort of catchy little motto or slogan. More devotees, happier devotees. What do you think of that? It's quite nice, I think. More devotees. Of course, we want more devotees. It's the movement of Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya wanted everyone, actually, to become a devotee. The whole world. And even Prabhupada, well, Lord Chaitanya, also in Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Srila Prabhupada there have made comments like, this Krishna consciousness movement is going to eventually spread to other planets. We are just waiting for NASA. That's the American space people. And I don't know, maybe their colleagues or in Russia to actually go to other planets. That's a whole other subject, of course. But let's just say to go to other planets, and once they get things sorted out so they can do that in reliable ways, then, well, Prabhupada talked about the movement going to other planets. So maybe NASA is being engaged by Lord Chaitanya in that way. So more devotees is definitely a very important part of what is the Krishna consciousness movement and what is the development of the Krishna consciousness movement. But we don't want in South Africa, where I'm based, there's a very interesting and sort of very telling, revealing type of idea that, there's a big Hindu community there, but now about half of them are not Hindus, they're Christians. And that's happened in different ways, but one way is that the Christians, they have their supporters in America and Europe, perhaps, definitely in America, who have lots of money, and they send money to South Africa so that the Christians can buy groceries for the poor Hindus and then convert them by supplying them with groceries. And so they are called grocery Christians. And if we, or even say if the Muslims came along and did the same thing but maybe a bit better, they'd become grocery Muslims because they're mainly in it for the groceries. So we don't want to just expand numerically based on something like that, something of that nature. We want people to actually become devotees, real devotees, and to be devotees because they have understood, they have appreciated that Krishna consciousness really is the truth, and it's the right thing to do. Otherwise what happens, just as a little historical aside, in the development of Christianity, right, going back to a few hundred years after Jesus left this world, in the beginning, it was the core, the teachers, the preachers, the leaders. They were his disciples, and then disciples of his disciples, and then very strict renunciates who were following very sincerely. But then they had this idea, let's spread it, and let's get as many people as we can. So they lowered their standards. They lowered their standards so that more people would come, and more people came. And in fact, so many more people came, huge numbers, far more than the very strict followers, that the new people with the low standards, they took over. And that's what Christianity is now. It's not the really serious followers who, for example, vegetarian and don't take intoxicants, but it's people who are on much lower levels. Anyway, that's just by the way. But we want more people, of course. We would like to engage as many people as possible. But it has to be done in real Krishna consciousness. So quantity, we're looking for quantity, but not at the expense of quality. You may have heard that Srila Prabhupada, there was at least one little period of time in the sort of mid-1970s as the movement was really dramatically starting to expand in America and Europe and places like that. It was really starting to expand. But Prabhupada became concerned about the quality. So Prabhupada at one point sent out communications saying, let us boil the milk. Meaning, when you boil milk, if you know something about milk sweets, then you keep boiling the milk and it thickens and it becomes richer and it really becomes something very special. So Prabhupada wanted us to do that. So this is connected with devotee care. It happens in ISKCON in some places sometimes. Even I visit somewhere a year later. In many cases, I can only manage to come once a year. So I visit. There I am, I've arrived, and I ask someone, where is ... somebody? Where is somebody? And the devotee I ask says, oh, I don't know. I haven't seen him for ages. I don't know if you've had that experience of asking or just looking around yourself and realizing, oh, I haven't seen this devotee X, for months. Where's he gone? What happened? Because what happens sometimes in some places, because we're very occupied, we emphasize being engaged in Krishna consciousness and not being lazy, but, really trying to be active in devotional service. But what happens is that sometimes we just get caught up in what we're doing and we don't notice when someone has drifted off. It definitely happens. It definitely happens. Or how about this, which sometimes happens, and sometimes it doesn't happen, but it does happen sometimes, that some devotee gets very sick, but no one goes to visit him or her in the hospital, except maybe immediate family. These things sometimes happen. In fact, we have a little bit of a reputation like that in some places. We're good with the numbers, but looking after them, we're weaker. So I don't know exactly how it works here, but personally, at least I personally, if there's someone who I know or even just know of who has somehow ended up in hospital, like you remember that one girl, she was on the book distribution party, she got hit by a motorbike on that road. You remember? Was it this road? Okay. So anyway, when I heard, I went to the hospital to see her. She was still unconscious. But, you know, we should try and take an interest on one hand. Of course, you can only take an interest in things which you are aware of. If we have no way of communicating these things, you may just not know that someone's in hospital. So that's another part of the picture. There's a need for communications. But there's a need, that the bottom line is, there's a need not just for more devotees, but for really looking after our devotees. So that our devotees who have come to us and who have read the books and heard the classes, and they know what Prabhupada has said, what Krishna has said, and how important it is to be a devotee and how important devotees are. But we also need this aspect. And a part of our consciousness of concern about looking after the devotees. So I just mentioned the one or couple of ideas which are, I think, extremely important ideas. Everyone should be aware, or at least there should be a department or some devotee or devotees who have the service of, we need a list. Who are our devotees? We need to know who we are. If you don't know who you are, generally you're considered to not be sane. If you don't know who you are. So we need to know. We should have a list of all our devotees. Oh, thank you. Merci beaucoup. What a nice girl. A caring girl, just saying. Now you have a personal example. Gosh. Right. Anyway, I was going to say, like a list of devotees, we should know who are our devotees. And not just that someone in their head sort of has some mental list, but we should have physical lists. And then if someone drifts off, even if someone just starts drifting off, what to speak if someone has actually drifted off, then we should ideally have someone or ones who go and visit them and find out what happened. Because usually if someone just sort of fades away and you don't see them, usually it's because something happened. Often it's because there was some sort of miscommunication or wrong communication or bad communication. Someone chastised them. Let me tell you a little story, an experience of my own. When I was actually a new devotee, I'm still a new devotee actually. I'll be completely frank and real with you. But when I was really a new devotee, then I was sitting in the prasadam room in the first temple where I joined in London, Berry Place Temple. And one of the new boys, like me, there were a few of us, the new boys, he was cleaning the floor. That is not a very sort of high-tech, rocket science type of activity. He's just cleaning the floor. So there he is, he's cleaning the floor and, he's trying to clean the floor. And some more senior devotee came in and said to him, "What are you doing? Oh, no, you don't do it like that. You do it like this." And this new boy is like, "Oh, sorry, okay. And now he starts doing it in that way. And not more than 1 minute later, another more senior devotee came through and said, "What are you doing?" It was just an action replay. "You don't do it like that," which is the way he had just been told to do it. "You don't do it like that." Sort of like, "You fool," although he didn't say it, but that was the mood. "You do it like this. Come on." Yeah, and he showed him some other way. "Oh, okay, sorry." Now he's doing it in the new way. And, seriously, not more than 1 minute later, another more senior devotee, number 3, came through, and the same thing happened. And our poor new devotee, by the time the third one had gone, he was literally in tears. He was literally in tears. So, yes, more devotees and happier devotees. Now here, so I was saying, in one way or another, whatever way it is, but in some way, some sort of coherent and intelligent way, we should have some way of knowing who has kind of drifted away, and then some way of following up nicely. Yeah. And following up nicely means that some devotee or devotees, maybe they get some training how to deal with people who are having difficulty. Because in terms of dealing with people of different types, dealing with people who are having difficulty is a very demanding type of service. You should know what you're doing. Don't just walk in and say, where you been? You got to, it takes some intelligence and some knowledge and some training how to do these things effectively so it works. And having done it or tried to do it a few times myself and seen how that devotee who drifted off, how they appreciated it and how they reacted to it and then came back actually, it has a big impact on the people if they see that someone or ones, that the devotees actually care and they're actually taking the trouble. It touches their hearts. Because that's Krishna consciousness. It's not just like methodology. We've mentioned before, I probably must have mentioned here, Srila Prabhupada said once, at least once, that Krishna consciousness, what is Krishna consciousness? It is the development of a loving relationship with Krishna, disguised as a process. It looks like a process. Do this, don't do that. And, at this time be here, at that time be there. It looks like a process, and even Prabhupada, of course, did refer to it as a process. But it's not just a process in the mechanical sense. It is the development of a loving relationship with Krishna. But as you develop love for Krishna, then you naturally develop love for everyone and everything which is Krishna's. So when anybody, but here we're talking particularly about people who are having difficulty, when they see that actually here's someone who actually cares, who is actually interested, and doesn't just want me to do some work or something like that, but wants to help me, oh, that moves people very deeply. And, that's why, in one sense, why Prabhupada's, in Prabhupada's time, going back 40 years ago and more, the devotees were ready to do anything, so many at least, because they knew that Prabhupada cared. Prabhupada had gone out of his comfort zone in India and undertaken great austerity and made a massive effort, and he didn't ask for 1 cent. He just wanted people to be happy, and he was always trying to help people to be happy, and that moved the devotees. So so that was my first point, shall we say, in practical terms. Looking after those who have drifted away, or those who are in difficulty. Someone has some sickness, or something like that. In Durban, it's a little on and off, I must admit, but we have, from time to time, there's a group of devotees, and they either do or go to funerals of devotees. Because as your community grows, particularly as it becomes big and there's thousands, then every day someone dies. Yeah, every day something happens, really significant. And oftentimes every day someone dies. So we had a group of devotees. They would either do the funerals or at least attend and do kirtan. And the families really liked it, because it's a way of caring when people need care. When there's some serious difficulty. And I don't want to cheapen the idea, but that group of devotees at one point, they got a special, a nickname for the group. Maybe you can even guess what it is. The Death Squad. But anyway, that's sort of cheapening it. That was just a joke. But the reality was they were doing a lot, and it was greatly appreciated. And, a really interesting thing. Sometimes some senior person, we have a few senior devotees who are expert at doing funerals. They can do funerals just so nicely. And at the end of the funeral, in many times, many elderly people come and say, "Will you do my funeral when I die?" Really? Seriously? Some devotees have had half a dozen, 6 or 7 people come to them at the end of one funeral and ask, "Can you please do my funeral?" Because when you care, when you actually care, not just mechanically, just because we meant to do it or have to do it, but when actually from the heart, you manifest a real concern and a real interest and express it, manifest it in your practical activities, it touches people's hearts. Anytime, but particularly when people are in difficulty of one sort or another. So that's one practical idea. Something that can be done in this way or that way, but in whatever way, in some way, it should be done. I want to give you now an example of one devotee who cared for many devotees actually, but he also cared for many non-devotees. But then he died. This is, or was, the very, very famous devotee. I'm sure so many of you have heard of him, Jayananda Prabhu in America. Jayananda Prabhu. You know, he never came to England. I joined him in England, and I was in England till he passed away. He passed away in 77, shortly before Prabhupada. So I never met him, I never saw him, but I'd heard of him. In England, we knew about Jayananda, and particularly in this sense of how beloved he was amongst the devotees and the common people. The common people too, just because of how he cared for them. There are many stories, and these are stories about how he cared for ordinary materialists and influenced them deeply just by being nice and preaching to them, but very nicely, and giving them prasadam in a very nice way. When they were arranging the Rath Yatra in New York, the next Rath Yatra after he passed away, it may have been then 78, it was either that or 77. So the devotees, a new team, because he arranged everything. He'd go to see the city council and the police and everybody to arrange everything. So now some other devotees had to do that. And they went to the main office of the New York City Council and met the main lady who was in charge of giving the permissions for having these types of events. And, you know, I imagine many of you have not been to New York. But New York, you know, America's different from Mauritius. In Mauritius, people are generally very easygoing and kind of gentle, relatively. In America, they're not so much. And New York is another world. In New York, they're tough. They are really tough people. So the devotees had to go and see this lady. And she was really tough. And she looked really tough. She was big, heavily built, loud, even like naturally aggressive woman who had managed somehow to get to the top in her field. So the devotees walked in, and, you know, the sort of gentle little devotees, and said, we would like to arrange permission to have our Rath Yatra. And she looked at them and said, I will not deal with you. I will only deal with Jayananda. And they're amazed. Oh, really? Okay. She even knows his name. Because most people, he told them his name was Johnny Ananda. Because they didn't quite get the Jaya bit. So, but she knew Jayananda. I'll not deal with you. I'll only deal with Jayananda. End. And they said, well, you know, we're very sorry to say Jayananda passed away just, you know, some months ago, whatever, just very recently. And the woman went into shock on the spot. And that woman, and the devotee who wrote this, what he says is, as tough as they come, you could say, without the least exaggeration. And you know, if you say that by New York standards, that's really tough. This woman went into shock and became just speechless and looked at them and started crying and broke down completely and had to leave for about 10 minutes. And only after 10 minutes could she come back and sort of compose herself enough to deal with the application. And, well, it was simply because when he dealt with her over several years, he did it in such caring, genuinely caring, and like personally interested ways that it touched her heart. It actually touched her heart deeply. You know, one other devotee, it's not recorded, but one other devotee told me, many years ago actually, a related story about Jayananda, that he went into some office of some government department, maybe New York or maybe some other part of the country, to speak to some woman who was dealing with such matters. And the woman was in a bad mood. Actually, the woman was like sort of in a depression, actually, about problems in her life. And she said to him, you know, I am simply the slang word for stool. That's what I am. And he said, no, you're not. God doesn't make stool. We do. Yeah. And she got encouraged. Yeah. She got encouraged. And that was the beginning of like a real spiritual relationship, because he was able to actually interact with her and touch her heart. You know, there's all sorts of things about Jayananda. One devotee ran into the back of a police car, drove into the back of a police car. Not a good idea, but he did. And the police, Jayananda was still alive. The policeman, and this is in New York also, and this is a New York policeman, came. And you know, what a mood he was in. And he saw, oh, it's a devotee. And he said, do you know Johnny Ananda? And the devotee said, yeah. He said, oh, I know him very well. What a person. Anyway, you can just carry on. So he just smashed the police car. Anyway, that's, you know, there are many stories about Jayananda and his caring for devotees. But now let's look at things on a deeper level. How can we become caring? You know, of course, you can just practice being caring, even if you don't feel so much care in your heart. But if you at least practice, it's better than nothing. But what really makes it much deeper is if you, through your cultivation of Krishna consciousness, if your heart has actually softened, at least to some degree, And then you start becoming, you could say, capable of caring more. Of course, we tend to care about ourselves, don't we? Don't we care a lot about ourselves? If things go wrong for us, wow, it's a problem. But caring for others, that, in real terms, it takes some spiritual advancement. So my point there is that in order to really become caring towards devotees, we need to practice our Krishna consciousness nicely, so our heart does become more softened, and in a more natural way we start to care more. So that's a point to bear in mind. Because you know that you may have heard this idea before, that relationships, we actually do a whole seminar on devotee relationships, and devotee care is part of that. They say relationships are like bank accounts. Did you ever hear that idea before? Relationships are like bank accounts. I'm sure so many of you have bank accounts. Some of you have probably got a number of bank accounts. And you make deposits, and the bank account goes up. The balance goes up. You make withdrawals, and the balance goes down. The same principle applies in relationships. Yeah. You treat someone nicely, and generally their perspective on you, their mood towards you, it improves, it increases. Generally, it's just natural. And if someday you do something not so nice, maybe you shout at them or tell them that they're a bit of a murk, or I don't know what you say in Creole, but the Creole equivalent, cochon, or something. And that's like making a withdrawal from the bank account you have with that person. So your balance in their consciousness goes down. It can go right down. And the next time they see you, they think, oh no, not him again. So caring, when you care for people, well, Prabhupada said, if you give mercy, you get mercy. It works in the sense that if you give mercy, Krishna sees and Krishna gives you mercy. But it also works in the sense, if you're nice to a person, then that person may be nice to you, and just, the laws of karma, right? That people will tend to be nice to you. It's just how things work in this world. Yeah, if you give mercy, you get mercy. So if you care, here we're talking about caring for devotees. If you care for devotees, you will tend to become cared for by devotees. And that's nice. That's nice. Let's see. So we need, what I mentioned, we need to care for devotees who drifted away or devotees who are struggling, suffering. We need to start proactive, caring programs just for the devotees. Not just the ones who are suffering or struggling, but for the devotees in general. And therefore, you'll find in quite a number of places, increasingly so, as time goes on, that devotees have started programs that the general sort of title for the type of program is often counselor programs. Have you heard of counselor programs? The whole idea originated in Chopati, and actually from His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj, that instead of someone comes to the temple for the first time, it's their first day, and they're moving around and they're interested enough to come. They came. They're already here. So they're interested, but it's the first time. And they don't know what is this and why is that and what's going on and what should I do and what should I not do. And there are devotees there, busy devotees, who are going this way and that way and both ways at the same time and around in circles sometimes. And that person is wondering, what should I do? But everyone's too busy. When I first visited a temple, it was in London. It was the end of 1972, last few days probably. And I walked in the door of the temple in London. I'd never been in a temple. And I was looking for a spiritual master. And I walked in. There was one devotee. You can imagine just the entrance, something like here. I walked in, there's a devotee. And I asked him, are you a spiritual master? He was one of the local brahmacharis. He'd been a devotee for maybe a year. But I didn't know that. So I asked him, are you a spiritual master? And he looked at me. And he said, you look really spaced out. And he walked off. Seriously. The first time I entered a temple. That's not the way to do things. Fortunately, the second devotee came walking down the stairs a few seconds later. He's been here even. Some of you would know Subhag Maharaj. Yeah, has he been here? No. Oh, you should get him to come. He is just like sort of angelic. Such a gentle soul. He came down, and I asked him. You know what I asked him? Are you a spiritual master? And he said, no, but he was so nice about it. And he took me into the temple, showed me the deities, Radha Landaneshwara, taught me the mantra. I knew the mantra already, but spoke to me for a while. And it was really nice. So, my point is, there's a point here, and we should look after our visitors. Perhaps it's a little different subject, but in Chopati and in some other temples too, they have a group of devotees on the Sunday program. All they do is find the new people. That's what they do. And then they stick with them right through the whole program. But anyway, my point here, I was saying about counseling. It started in Chopati, now it's in quite a number of places around, is that at least all the younger devotees must have a counselor. You're not allowed to not have a counselor. In some places where I go in Russia, if someone, because some people are very sensitive and, they have some difficulty developing relationships. In some of the places, they must have a counselor, but if they can't find one locally, they're allowed to have a counselor in another part of the country. But they communicate like by Skype on a weekly basis or however often, usually weekly. And, frankly, my experience, having seen this going on for some years in a number of places, is that it works. It really works. If you've got people, more senior devotees, who have a caring type of nature and who are knowledgeable enough, and they can accept counselees who they're then guiding even sometimes on a daily basis, but at least a weekly basis, keeping in touch, proactively keeping in touch, not just, call me when you have a problem, but proactively keeping in touch. And it really helps the younger devotees greatly. That someone who's more advanced and someone who knows you, basically who you are and what sort of person you are, and who actually is interested in you, and who is following you and following up on you and watching, keeping an eye on you, devotees really feel cared for, and it helps so much. And the drop-off rate amongst the younger, newer people is much lower. I mean, you always get a few drop off from time to time, but the rate is much lower. So it's a practical program. Do we do that here? We have counselors. Anyway, think about it. It's devotee care. It's real devotee care. And if it's done nicely, it works. It really works tremendously. Well, yeah, okay. Then devotee care. We should have training programs to train the devotees in all aspects of Krishna consciousness. You know how I learned how to distribute books? I went out on my first Harinam in January 1973. My first Harinam. And in those days we were doing Back to Godhead magazines on the streets. And the devotee gave me a stack of Back to Godheads and said, "Here, stand here, distribute them. People must give 10 pence. Goodbye." Well, he didn't even say goodbye. He just went. And there I was. Oh, really? Okay. How do I do it? What should I do? Fortunately, a couple of minutes later, a nice Hindu gentleman walked up and just sort of volunteered himself. Is that Back to Godhead? Can I buy one? So, training programs, they're a very important part of caring for devotees. Training programs and making the programs available. How to worship the deities, how to help with the worship of the deity, like the backup. How to preach. Have any of you, I don't know how many of you give classes. Have any of you attended a seminar on how to give a class? There are ways of giving classes. And if you know some of the strategies for giving classes, it makes it so much easier. Oh, it makes it so much easier. It's amazing. And you can go on talking for hours, and people will think, wow, he's like, a natural expert. But no, he just learned how to do it. How about, ladies, what do you think about this? Cooking classes. No, we don't need that because you all know how to cook, right? Anyway. It's often difficult to teach Indian ladies, Hare Krishna, how to cook in an actual Krishna conscious way. It is not just the same as gropwa or shushu, as Granny taught me. Yeah. So this is a good way of caring for devotees. Otherwise, you throw people in the deep end. And when you throw people in the deep end, some people are survivors. And you can throw them in almost any deep end, and they'll kind of come through. But not everyone is a survivor. Some people are delicate, and you've got to kind of hold them by the hand. So training programs, monitoring programs are very helpful for caring for devotees. Here now I want to mention here's an interesting point. And this is a sort of subtle philosophical, spiritual point. If you are the carer and you're meant to care for someone who is the cared for, what should your mood be? Like the underlying type of fundamental attitude that you have. We say that when you are the carer and you're meant to be looking after, in one way or another, devotees, we say the rasa, to put it in very high transcendental terms, the rasa is parental. The rasa is parental. You follow? The rasa is not boss to worker. That's not the rasa. Yeah, the rasa is parental. You all know what that means. Parental means caring, nourishing, protecting, guiding, sometimes how would you put it? Sometimes being able to absorb the energy when there's a crisis in the life, like when you're a parent. Every parent knows that from time to time, every child goes through a crisis. Am I right, parents? Is it every day? But anyway, it happens. And you know what they say? Little children, little problems. Big children, big problems. Yes. So being a parent, you've got to be able to absorb that, the problem energy, and sort of dissipate it and bring order into the chaos, the emotional chaos, or just practical chaos. That's part of being a parent. So part of being a carer, like underlying type of frame of mind, orientation, is parental. Because generally caring means you're caring for someone junior. So, and it's not the boss type of mood, the manager. that I'm caring for you, I'm managing you, do this, do that. Yeah, it's definitely much deeper than that. So, yeah, so one has to really try and deal with them. You know, for example, when you're caring, if you're caring for someone, like if you're a counselor and you're caring for them in that type of situation, you're a counselor. And the person, the counselee, does something wrong. Have you heard the very famous idea? A cup, if a cup is full half, it's either half full or half empty. Well, it's both actually. So, but, you know, if it's half empty, it's like, it's half empty. If it's half full, well, you know, that's good. It's good. At least it's half full. So when you're caring as a counselor or as a trainer, a monitor, then, again, as I said, dealing with difficulty is very challenging. It's perhaps the most challenging type of service you can have, dealing with difficulty, people who are having difficulty. So, you know, when someone particularly if someone makes a bad mistake, and it's a problem, then you know what conditioned nature is like. It's so easy to get angry with them and chastise them. But at least I can say my experience in so many situations is that if you want to correct fault, someone has done something wrong. Generally, not necessarily always, but generally, it works much better. It's much more effective to do it very nicely and in ways that they feel encouraged to improve, rather than that they've been chastised and told that they're, you know, a bit stupid, and if they don't do better, then, you know, they're pretty useless. Some people can respond positively to that sort of treatment, but usually it's only people who are much more humble already. Your average person who's not so humble, if you start telling them that they're a murk, you are the biggest murk I've met in the last 6 months. Generally, it doesn't inspire people much that, okay, I better stop being a murk. You know, oftentimes they'll think, well, who do you think you are telling me I'm a murk? You're a murk sometimes. Yeah, this is human nature. So caring for devotees when you're in a sort of leadership role or like a counselor, it's generally more effective to encourage. Improvement by encouragement rather than improvement through chastisement. I want to just mention, I think it'll be the last thing, oh yes, definitely. Last thing I want to mention, and it's a more sort of advanced level of development of programs of devotee care. That is caring for people, or generally families, when the family, like the breadwinner, the husband and or the wife, they become unemployed and they start running out of money. It happens. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if you've got someone like that, at least one sort of family in the community right now. But it definitely happens from time to time. Someone loses their job. They're the only one who can work in the family. And sometimes they lose their house and their cars, and these things happen. So this is a more sort of developed aspect of devotee care. But you'll find in many places, definitely in many places in South Africa, amongst the Muslim community, they look after. If something like that happens to one of the families in the community, they look after them. Either they employ them or they just give them money or at least food. They do. And it's something that has to be done intelligently. But, you know, from time to time, members of our communities, there's some crisis, some catastrophe in their lives, and they become bankrupted, and they need help in that sense. And it's something you have to think about, how to deal with such situations, so that we don't just abandon our devotees, but also so that we don't get taken advantage of, because that can happen also if someone just becomes lazy. But that's another element in devotee care. So these are some ideas on devotee care. Some of the principles involved, consciousness involved, and some practical things that you can actually start doing tomorrow. Really, can start doing tomorrow. And if you get into some of these things and get them working, it'll make a big difference. It'll make a big difference. And the word will get out also amongst the community at large, that when you get into Hare Krishna, they look after you. They look after you, and because Hare Krishna, sometimes we get a reputation that we're out for people's money. I don't know how it is here, but definitely in some places for sure. It's not a good reputation to have. But we should really try to develop the reputation of caring and giving and helping and looking after those who come to us and looking after our people. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
What should we do now? Hogaya. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki.
So thank you, Maharaj, for your inspirational talk and ideas about devotee care. And this is a plus for us, as we have launched a committee. We are trying to settle a committee where we can deal with devotee care. And as you all know that this year, during Rath Festival for the end of the year, we received lots of Maharajas, senior devotees. And tomorrow, we are going to have His Holiness Bhakti Anugrah Janardhan Swami Maharaj, who is going to come at 5 o'clock. He's reaching Mauritius, and he will also give an inspirational talk on devotee care on Wednesday. So we are inviting devotees to be here same time. So on Wednesday, Maharaj is going to give a talk on devotee care. On Monday next, We are going to receive His Holiness Bhakti Devotee Swami Maharaj here again Monday next. So be among us, and Maharaj also is going to give talks on devotee care. So we want everyone here and those who are not here who are going to come to have this inspirational aspect of devotee care, where we can at least at the end of this year, we have put a committee for on 23rd of December again, where we are going to gather all the ideas and suggestions and just launch for the devotee care committee, where we can take care of our devotees as Maharaj just mentioned. And today we have one anniversary on devotee. His Grace Radha Mohan Prabhu. And as it is Ekadashi, Prabhu has prepared a cake, and he wants Maharaj to cut it for him and take Maharaj, of course, to taste. And also, as a matter of devotee care, again, Srila Prabhupada gave everyone his book. He has printed books, and December we are into